pretty warm here today, right? Okay, so after watching GC students maneuver the icy sidewalks in January and even today, walking like penguins, I thought about this. And this question comes up whenever we are talking about climate change. It is, and I'm asking you, do you care about polar bears? I'm standing on thin ice, guys. I need a reply. Do we care about polar bears? I mean, really care to the extent that you'd be willing to share your house with them or have them in a walk-in freezer or even your fridge. Do you care to that extent? Nope, I don't think so. So now that the ice is broken, let's move to serious discussions. After the cold week we had at the end of January, the question many people had, including the president, was, why do we have a cold winter when it's supposed to be getting warmer? Or simply, where's our good old global warming? First, it's important to understand the difference between weather and climate. Weather is short-term changes in our atmosphere, minutes, days, maybe weeks, whereas climate is the weather of a place over a long period of time, years, decades, centuries. Borrowing the analogy used by New York Times, weather is how much money you have in your pocket today, whereas climate is your net worth. While portions of US were experiencing deep freeze, many parts of the planet were getting record-breaking heat waves. Australia, for example. When we average these temperatures out over our planet, we see that the hotter temperatures are tipping the scale. Like Marshall Shepard, former president of American Meteorological Society, said, it's not where you live warming, it's global warming. And this global warming is one of the many phenomena of climate change. Our oceans are warming up, ice sheets are shrinking, weather patterns are getting more erratic. Frequency of extreme weather events like hurricanes, storms, forest fires, and flood is increasing. And I know it's very hard to care about polar bears and penguins because we just don't know them. But it gets easier when we see people in Bangladesh going through flood year after year. It gets even easier when it's our friends and families in Florida and California going through hurricanes and storms and fires. But it all becomes a reality when you rush to your basement every hour just to see if it's flooded or not. The flood Goshen received last year will happen again and again, and our infrastructures are not equipped to keep up with it. Even when the effects of climate change come knocking at our doors and we don't respond, what exactly are we waiting for? I have been in a position of environmental privilege, as have many of you. And maybe we'll get lucky, and we will never face huge consequences within our lifetime. But our children and grandchildren definitely will, and they'll ask us, why didn't you do anything when you should have? Baba Diom was right. In the end, we only love what we understand. We conserve only what we are taught. And right now, we should teach ourselves and be taught how our actions are leading to our eventual downfall. Okay, it's really getting hot. So one of the many arguments that climate change deniers have is that the change in climate is natural and that there's no need to worry. Yes, the change, or we have had naturally occurring climate change, but none of the natural causes of climate variations can account for the warming we observe today. Increase in greenhouse gases through use of fossil fuels, cutting down of trees, especially after the Industrial Revolution, has led to increased change in our climates. And climate change happens for a reason. Right now, that reason is us. So here's my first point. Speak up. If you don't know anything about it, listen. If you think you know nothing about it, ask. If you still think it's fake news, read about it in reliable news sources and scientific reports. If the world's climate scientists were so good at conspiracy, they would be better off putting their astounding skills to do basically anything else that's more cheery than predicting gloom and doom. It's disappointing and sad when our arguments have nothing to do with any sane, rational reasons, but simply where we fall in the political spectrum. Climate change isn't just words. It's real, and it's scary. It recognizes no borders and knows no walls. My title, Why Climate Change, represents a lot of things. Why is climate change happening? Why does it matter? Why should we talk about it? Why are people denying it? And these are some of the things that I'll be focusing on today. So, United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, released their latest reports a few months ago. Those who are concerned about the legitimacy of IPCC. So IPCC is the UN body for assessing the science related to climate change. And it was established by United Nations Environmental Program and World Meteorological Society in 1988 to provide regular scientific assessments concerning climate change. It was a political move, but the politicians are not listening to the advice that's given by the report. So the most recent 2018 report highlights the number of impacts that could be avoided by limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to 2 degrees Celsius or more. I know, half a degree Celsius, you don't really notice it in your tea, do you? Well, but the Earth does. Half a degree difference can reduce the predicted sea level rise by 4 inches and lower the related risk to 10 million people, and maybe save 10 to 30% of our existing coral reefs. Let's be honest. Climate change isn't as bad as we think. It's worse. One of the consequences that we are seeing today is an increase in the frequency of extreme weather events. This affects the infrastructures of towns and cities, access to drinking water, and other resources that supports daily life. It drives displacement of populations. And since 2008, an average of 26.4 million people per year have been displaced from their homes by disasters brought on by natural calamities. 85% of those weather-related. This is equivalent to approximately 1 person displaced every second. Displacement results in migration and ensues national and international tensions. Worldwide fund scientists have estimated that most species on this planet, including plants, will have to quote-unquote move faster than 1,000 meters per year if they are to survive. How are the plants going to move? I don't know. And I wish I could say that extinction of some species doesn't really matter and that we have plenty of fish in the sea, but then I'd be lying. Because our seas and oceans have more plastics in them while the aquatic population is dwindling. Beyond numbers and figures, what is climate change about? It's about the soil being unable to produce any more food. It's about Earth becoming less habitable, about food insecurity, about vulnerable people who then become recruit targets for terrorist groups. It's about people risking their lives fleeing across oceans and across deserts to escape famine and drought and war. It's about developed countries' complacency towards climate responsibility. It's about those countries refusing to host people. It's about international tension and hostility. It's about us, our present, our future, and our planet. The urgency cannot get any clearer. Despite what we think, we no longer have the luxury of planning without urgent action. National and international governments hold a lot of power to create unprecedented and remarkable changes. The most notable step would be to drastically reduce the use of fossil fuels while ramping up renewables like solar, wind, geothermal, tidal, and more. This will require huge political shifts that may seem unfathomable, especially in the light of current administration's climate decisions. While the US cannot officially exit the Paris Agreement a few days after the 2020 elections, the administration has proposed canceling the Clean Power Plan, which reduces emissions from power plants and decreasing fuel efficiency in our vehicles, the biggest source of carbon pollution. So please, vote wisely the next time you go and vote. Countries should also drop subsidies from production and use of fossil fuels, and globally, also from forest-destroying agricultural expansion. Countries in European Union, Canada, Mexico have introduced tax on carbon, which basically or ideally makes the emitters pay for the cost of carbon that they produce. Carbon taxing should be made global and should be more strictly regulated. I think I'll put these back on now. As individuals, there's a lot we can do as well. Use public transport, ride our bikes more if it's just going to the grocery, share our car sharings, switching to electric and hybrid vehicles, decreasing energy consumption, using energy-efficient appliances, good insulation in homes, less consumption. Shopping is not therapeutic. Less waste, more recycle. We can save a lot of money, resources, and reduce carbon emission by making sure that not all the recyclable waste is going into landfill, and also the food waste. And eating less meat. We don't have to completely, I'm not saying that everyone should be vegan from tomorrow, but at least let's reduce how much meat we consume on a daily basis. Ultimately, it means that we should work towards stopping the activities that cause it, enhance our resilience to its effects, and talk about it. It's not going to be easy. Nothing ever really is. But it would be foolish to do nothing about it. Healthy planet and stable climate are not political issues. It's about families, communities, ecosystems, diversity, biodiversity, and humanity. This, right here, right now, is where we begin. And I'm going to put my jacket back on. While we are living in our air-conditioned bubble, we often forget that people do not have the same privilege everywhere else. Just because it's cold in winter doesn't mean there's no change in our climate. Thank you.